Question for you today: why are we such an angry nation? That's the question. We'll put it up for you on the screen right there, and you can let me know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. Now, from daily road rage incidents on our way to work, the frustration that we feel when we get stuck in traffic. Can you imagine this morning you were sitting like this, holding your steering wheel very tight, to petty office conflict and other workplace disputes, public outbursts like the Spur incident. Remember last week we covered that for you, that we witnessed online, and even fights in Parliament. Now it seems that our society's general public and our leaders are having trouble controlling anger in situations that really require professionalism or acceptable adult behavior. But where does this anger derive from, and how do we control and deal with it? Joining us in studio is anger management specialist and consultant at Anger and Stress Management Center, Karen van Zyl. Karen, a very good morning to you and welcome.
And morning to you, Elvis. It's great to be here with you.
First and foremost, I want to take you back to the previous interview we had on the UN Happiness Report. It's a happiness report, they call it, and they suggest that in Africa, on this continent, we are a very unhappy nation. Do you agree with that?
I think it's really an interesting study, that, and as Zinat mentioned, you know, a lot of things making people unhappy, and I think, you know, anger as an emotion is a natural, normal human emotion, but unfortunately with emotions, you know, they make us, but they can also break us if we don't control them and express them appropriately.
The one thing that I can't reconcile is that the Nordic countries are very happy people, while we, that has got lots of sun here in this country, because they say sun makes you happy, are very unhappy. I can't reconcile with that fact. I lived in London for a while, and I promise you I was the most unhappiest being there.
Yes.
So how do you reconcile that particular fact?
With the grey weather and the rain and the doom, I think it's got more to do with than the weather. It's obviously got to do with a lot of issues. And what we try to do at the Anger and Stress Management Center is try to help people to identify some of their triggers. And one of the big triggers, and I think that came out in the UN's report as well, is unmet needs. And that seems to be a huge issue that we often look at with people. People are feeling unheard, they're feeling unseen, they're feeling unappreciated, there's not a lot of respect sometimes around. And I think, you know, life is becoming faster, and more and more people on the planet, and I think we have to starting to think about how we're going to address these issues.
Can one identify anger, or define anger rather, and is it perhaps a natural emotion, or is it a learned or developed emotion over time?
Okay, obviously it's an emotion, so it's a trigger comes in, we instinctually go into a fight or flight. Adrenaline is being released. Of course, what does adrenaline do? It drives us. So we've got to really be aware, and what's happening in the brain is quite amazing. The emotional center of the brain, the amygdala, is very aroused. The area of the brain that deals with rationality and reason, the more prefrontal cortex parts, very simply, are going to be shut down when your emotional kind of irrational part is taken over. And I think this is, if people understand it, they can quite often put in measures to control it. So this
are those stages that you're talking about that people would go through, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the measures then that one would put in place in order to avoid these triggers that you mentioned earlier?
Okay, so I would say our number one thing that we work on with people, obviously we're talking here, you know, there are certain disorders, etc., things like mood disorders, personality disorders, where anger is obviously a problem. We're talking really often at our center with people who are just dealing with, you know, day-to-day traffic jams, irritations, etc. So the most important thing I would say is helping them become aware of what their triggers are. And we do quite a lot of work on that. We get them very aware of when they're being triggered. You know, you don't just get angry, even though you might think 0.1 of a second and you've overreacted. There is a process of almost kind of climbing a cliff. So we need to get them aware where they are and how far they are up and what could they possibly do to calm down.
Well, it seems like we're an angry nation. Should the entire nation now come for angry management to you, Karen?
Well, that would be wonderful for us, and absolutely, I think we all need to start thinking about when we are getting triggered and what are we going to do. So, I don't know if we want to go into some calming down, practical tools.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, what we always say is, don't react in the moment. It's kind of fatal to react in the moment if you're irrational. So what we would suggest is first try to calm down. So use a breathing technique that often works well. Deep breathing, sitting up nice and straight, breathing in, exhaling, a long exhale, longer than the inhale. Counting as well. Counting to 10 is not so good because, you know, your brain knows that. So count backwards, count objects. If you're on the road, focus on counting street poles or how many red cars pass you, because what you do there is you are distracting the irrational part of the brain, the amygdala. You're getting the prefrontal cortexes, the more cognitive parts working again. Also, assertive communication. You know, we've got to learn how to start expressing what we want and what we need from others. Bottled anger is very destructive, so we want to think about that as well.
In 10 seconds, where can people get assistance?
Okay, I think best is to go to our website, which is www.angerstress.com. There's a lot of information there, Elvis.
Karen, I thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio.
It's a pleasure.